Hello everybody again. Welcome back to Recall Review. And this one is going to be on number 3, USA, third show ever produced. And it's another good one. It's got a lot of things happening in it. And we're going to break it down in maybe a few different ways than what we did on the first couple.
Do a little analytical and look back at what could have been done different maybe. Because let me say this, we were talking about before we started recording, as that I think all the great masters, Harley and Steamboat or Flair, never had their best match. And what I mean by that is they were never satisfied. And I think your best bookers, you booked, I booked, but you could go back and watch something and think, we could have done this better or that better. And it was about details, which you don't see so much of the details today. Those are glossed over more. So that would, and we'll talk about that a little bit.
Talk about that too. So let's just start with the beginning of the show. And I think if you'll notice, the show opened up in darkness, basically.
Yeah.
What we were doing is darkening the building because that USA set was a lit set. And this is the first show. We're still doing new things.
Right.
We're still getting the bugs out. We got for the first time, the actual opening the way we wanted it, in which the set was lit up, but you couldn't see Gordon and I until the house lights came up. Also, there was a big crowd.
I'm just going to say, the first thing I noticed is there were more people.
A lot more people.
Yeah.
Probably 3 times as large a crowd as in that first one.
I'd say that's due to the live show, the first live show.
Everybody then gets to buy a ticket. They could buy a ticket at the live show to get into the TV show too.
Right.
So people that were there at the live show, the Coliseum show, went and bought their tickets and came the next day. It was the following day, was the next one of those programs. So yeah, we had a bigger crowd. You got a lot better response when guys were being introduced. When baby faces were coming in, obviously the fans were more in tune to what was going on.
Right.
And it kind of started with a guy called Cousin Junior.
Well, no,
you know,
no, it didn't. You introduced a little skinny Marine.
I sure did.
Brian Armstrong. And for the young people watching us, and the younger people, that is the road dog, Jesse James, 100 pounds lighter. But his dad was a Marine. Bob
was a Marine.
Yes.
And something that I did not say during this little short segment with Brian was the fact that Brian wasn't just an ordinary Marine. He was part of the National Honor Guard based in Washington, D.C. And his job was to just go out and do special things for special people in the nation's capital. And the reason was that he graduated basically top of his recruitment, his entire group and training. And so did his father, Bob, 20 years or more before him.
And talk about the honor guard, like you'll see a Marine or Army or Navy honor guard at football games stuff. That's it. Part of what he did.
He did the dignitaries. It's for dignitaries. So he had a special place as a Marine rather than just being simply a Marine. So first match on the card was Motley Crue against Austin Idol. Austin Idol's there because he was on that card the night before in the Coliseum. And when I had him come in and stay over, I had him come and stay on purpose because I wanted to use him on TV, obviously.
You know how long I've known him?
Oh,
and when I went, when I was made NWA Rookie of the Year in '67 in Tampa, he went to high school with Mike Graham, and so that's how I first met him. He won't admit to this, but I beat him in a 1-on-1 half-court basketball game too, on the outdoor court where those guys went to school. But yeah, it goes all the way back, and he was so much bigger when he started in the business. He was 280, 285.
The great story about Austin Idol is I was in with him in Australia. He was Mike McCord in Australia. And he was still that 310 pound muscled up guy. I didn't see him for 2 years. I went into the dressing room in 1975 in Memphis, and I sat down by him. And I didn't speak to him.
Didn't know who he was.
I didn't know who he was. And, and then when he finally said, hey, you're not going to talk to me? I said, who are you? And he said, Ron, I'm Mike McCord, man. You know who the hell? So, you know, he had changed his, he had totally changed his body.
You know,
in a 2-year period of time.
how, talking about his, when he was big, 285 to 300, a lot of the boys, a lot of the wrestlers, back when I first went to Tampa in 67, there was a Sweden house. I don't know if it's still there or not, but
and eat all day long, eat all afternoon.
What he would do is he would take a plate and, like, he would fill it with Swedish meatballs and come back to the table and he'd clean that and he'd go back and fill it with mashed potatoes. I mean, one plate of one style of food, and so he made 4 or 5 trips.
So he not only changed his body, he changed his whole his success. He became a success because of
the personality.
Of his body.
Exactly. He was. When I say this is not a knock. He was a basic worker, but the idol gimmick, the costuming, the look, and the promos made the difference.
Made a huge difference for him. He became a star pretty much instantly. And in this TV match, he uses the figure 4, which he continued to use as his finish. And obviously, he's one of the great finishes of all time. And you know, it's a legit hold.
Oh yes.
You know, it's just like Fuller leg lock. It's a legit hold. I mean, it will hurt you if you want to hurt somebody. So, you know, and then we came back, I believe, after that with a video. And basically, what had happened here is this third program was actually, the one that we saw was the 4th program. The third program did not air in a lot of markets because something happened on the day that it was supposed to air. So we
went special back, or something.
Some special knocked it off the air, not just in one market, but all 3 markets. And then we had to go back and readjust and take the third show, and basically we took a match out. So there's a little confusion about what's going on in that match, in which you see the RPMs attacked Johnny Rich before the bell rings, and then he comes back later in the show after he gets himself patched up and joins his partner in the match. And so there was a little bit that I got a little lost myself, because I had to remember that, wait a minute, we lost that third show because of something that was going on nationally across the country. And so this third show, that's one of the features got put into it. And I believe there may be a second one down there that got put into that 4th show that now we're calling number 3 from the same predicament. Might have been the angle, in fact, with Bob Armstrong at the very end. So in the first interview, obviously, it was the Riches and Cousin Junior, and, you know, local interview, local cities in the market. Probably in the future, we may start taking out some of those interviews because there's just a spot there that runs music. It tells where the wrestling matches are going to be. And, you know, I think if we want to keep these programs rolling along for you, make them fast, you want to be able to see the action. So we'll probably start to remove some of those local.
Well, you know, we're talking about Cousin Junior. He actually had a run with WWF for a while as Uncle Elmer. Uncle Elmer was part of it, but Hillbilly Jim. They were a threesome. Junior had some personal problems, which cost him that spot. But so he was good enough at one point to be up on the big show, basically.
Right, for darn sure. So first interview, like I said, the Riches and Cousin Junior. And then the second match was Terry Adonis against Scott Armstrong. Pretty short little match. Scott, again, catches him with a real nice, foot to the face that, really took him out. And,
the slow-mo covers that so well.
And the slow-mo was beautiful.
Yeah.
And then we changed it up a little bit. We had an interview start from the ring. Immediately followed that match. Rather than have Scott go to the set with Gordon, he starts to do his interview from the ring. And then along comes Mr. Mouth, Ron Wright, and his boys. Start with the dog. And Scott looked pretty good against the 2 of them. And then once Stomper got in there as well, then obviously they did a pretty good job.
I watched Stomper kicking, and I thought, Archie, is your leg getting tired? I mean, he must have kicked
He
you.
must have kicked him in the stomach 30 times.
I thought, change up, do something a little
30
different,
times,
right?
30 times, but and you know, he was pretty stiff for those stomps. You know,
Well, I worked with him at 63 in Kansas City when he first started the Stomper gimmick, and I remember he was really a nice guy, and he said, "Now I'm just getting started with this, and when I give you that stomp," he said, "You'll sell that." I said, "Yeah," and afterward I said, "It wasn't hard to sell it because you laid it in pretty good."
He made it pretty easy to sell things.
Yeah, he did.
You know, and so after the three of them beat the hell out of basically Scott Armstrong, then there's a little break in the show right there, and what happened is something was cut out, and they went to the set with Gordon.
Right.
And they're still trying to get Scott up. The Riches are out there trying to get Scott up on his feet, and you know, Ron Wright had a great show this show because he got to do what Ron Wright did so well. He just took it. He just took all 3 times he was out there. All 3 times he was just wow.
You know what I did? You know what he did do it, and I noticed that he didn't do it. Was he always said that like a evangelist, you know,
he
how
was drawing air,
yeah,
had to suck in some air,
and then to go. And I thought, damn, has he got an oxygen tank built in or something? Because he was,
he had plenty of get up and go when it was time to do interviews. He was certainly your
here's
guy.
something that we talked about before we started recording too, and we're in the middle of this, basically almost in the middle of the show. But to be a little analytical about this and looking back, we were thinking, what could you have done different? And the biggest thing is, if you have Ron Wright doing promos on your show, you can pretty much be assured that nobody else at that volume that is going to better him or match him. And yet, almost because of all these storylines or angles, as we called them back then, everybody was yelling. And we were saying that maybe we should have brought, that should have been brought down a little bit to make more of a roller coaster emotional thing. And I had said, when we talk about the personality profile later, and I'll mention what I thought about for Doug Furnas there. But
Ron Wright was great at what he did. He
Yes.
was absolutely fantastic at what he did. But I'm thinking back about when I watched this show, and the point you're making here is, I have a lot of young talent in this crew. If
Right.
you look at this crew, you got Johnny Rich and Scott Armstrong and David Haskins, who is Davey Rich.
And all these guys who we
Doug
don't...
Furnas is
Yeah.
green. Buddy Landell is green. Even Hector Guerrero is fairly green at this point.
Right.
This is 1988.
Plus
So,
the carpenters that are doing the jobs.
All of those.
Yeah.
So, and when you get these young boys out there doing those interviews, and they're following Ron Wright, they have a tendency to want to try to outdo him.
And one thing I
to.
mentioned to you about the promos too is anybody that's old enough to have watched Georgia Championship Wrestling when Wildfire Tommy Rich was the top babyface, you realize that when he sat down with Gordon, it was, let me tell you something, Gordon. That was Tommy. Let me tell you, he led that way. And I sat here and I counted 3 other guys. Let me tell you something, Gordon. And I thought, come on, change it up. But part of that is, there's fads in clothing, there's fads in everything, and guys follow in the business. You're watching somebody, and sometimes it's not even, you don't realize you're picking it up. It's just, you've heard it so much, it becomes part of what you do.
And like I said, there's a lot of youth in this.
Oh, yeah.
There's a lot of young guys that need leading, that haven't had a lot of interview time. So
I'll be like Tommy Rich.
There you go. I want to be like Tommy Rich. So,
Right.
So then we get to the personality profile on this particular one. It happens to be my dad, who is running a training school on the far side of the state of Tennessee,
Right.
Oliver, Tennessee, on his ranch. And he's basically, Gordon is helping him plug the school. And, I know that some decent guys came out of there.
Yeah.
Out of that school. And, and you were right. I think it was $2,000
For
eight
8 weeks. 8 weeks. 8 weeks.
8
right.
weeks,
Yeah.
which was a tremendous amount of money back in '88.
Sure was.
And I'm pretty sure that he had pretty full school.
It's
so.
a lot of money to let Buddy hand you your ass every day.
Oh yeah, and that's exactly what was happening to them poor boys. You know, when they in fact, he worked them on the farm because Danny Davis, who's going to be the Nightmare and a great talent,
trainer,
trains for WWE, trains for a lot of different companies. He told me, he said, Ron, he'd get us up at daylight and he'd work us all day long. He'd take us at 5 o'clock into the barn where the ring was, and he'd work us for 3 hours there. He goes, I don't know how the hell he had all the energy to do it. He said, we were all just dead tired by the time we got in to do any wrestling. Right. And he said, then we got stretched for 3 hours. So, you know, it was a different training program, undoubtedly, than what they do today.
Well, to make comparison. It was
a different time.
Yeah. Excuse me. I went to Boston, Massachusetts in February 1960 to break into the business. I was 19 years old. Been an athlete, done all the sports. And basically, you weren't smart to the business. I mean, and they weren't going to smarten you up until they were sure you're going to stick. And initially, just to see if you're going to stay in the city of Boston, they handed me my ass every night for a couple weeks, right? But when I tell young guys, they say, when did you get smart to the business? I said, well, I started in February 60. My first match was July the 4th, 1960. Guess when they smartened me up? July the 4th, 1960. And they look at you, really? Yes, really. Because, again, the business was a closed shop. They wanted to be sure you were going to stick. And if you couldn't take the pounding or take, you know, the physical part of it, then you weren't going to hang. Well, they weren't going to tell you that it was a work, and it was an easier way of doing it.
It was another day and time. Man.
Yeah, exactly.
You know, and those that are in it today and they're training today, you don't know how lucky you are.
That's, you know, yeah.
You should have had a lot of snake pits.
Some of these kids today think, that trainer yelled at me. If I'd have quit because he yelled at me, I'd have been gone probably the first 2 hours I was in the gym.
So third match was J.D. Wolfe, who was the guy that was in the last program. In fact, he's the one that started off with a big drop kick. And
before we get to there, we were talking about the profile. I had mentioned to Ron, we were talking about this beforehand, because everybody was so pumped up on their promos, and everybody was loud, not trying to be like Ron Wright, but that's, you know, basically the same level. I thought Doug Furnas is the college graduate here. And to me, I would have split the profile and had Doug come in and get analytical about what he was going to do and why he was going to do it, and basically do it at a lower key, and then you come back out of that and blow it back up.
And maybe, as with you used to do in the old days, in southeastern Knoxville days, you would have talked to him maybe about college. About his football experience, not even talk about wrestling.
Exactly.
You know,
or how do the two, how do they blend together?
Calm things down, basically.
Exactly.
Next match, J.D. Wolfe, who took a great bump on the last TV at the beginning of the tag match, is in there with Bill Dundee. And I think fans that aren't familiar with Bill Dundee, you got a little bit of idea of what kind of fire Bill had. Yeah. I mean, Bill was a pretty decent worker at this point. He was in pretty much his
age. Was he, when they first came to this country, George, what was his?
George Barnes.
Barnes, yes. They were a tag team, Bill Dundee and George Barnes.
Yes, and a darn good tag team.
Yeah.
George Barnes actually was a better worker at that time than Bill Dundee was. George Barnes went back to Australia because he got homesick, and Bill never went home.
We were talking about bookers on this show too. Dundee at one point booked Memphis for Lawler. I mean Lawler and Jarrett. He booked Oklahoma for Bill too, for Bill Watts. So obviously, and if he went and worked for Watts as a booker, he was a pretty damn good one because Bill wouldn't have had it any other way.
So there was actually a third guy that came from Australia. It was a guy named Johnny Gray. And so you had Bill Watts, you had George Barnes, you had Bill Dundee, and you had Johnny Gray that came. And Johnny Gray and George Barnes went back to Australia about the same time. Bill Dundee stayed forever, basically.
In fact, he's still here.
And yes, and he is still here. Yes, he is. Third interview was the Armstrongs, Landell, and Hector again. Pretty much the heel group, the entire heel group. And the next segment was... it was the first ever Coliseum match. It was Landell against Furnas from the actual Coliseum, which they were going to be They're going to see a lot more of those.
Yeah.
Because we've been waiting for this third TV, for the actual event. So we're starting to record some of those matches.
Well, part of the psychology or the advertising idea was if we had clips from the Coliseum on the TV show, it was, well, and the TV shows were to entice the people to buy a ticket and come to the buildings. It wasn't like today where the network is paying big money to have you on TV every week, and so sometimes it's not relevant if you even have a house show. But then it was all about, so here, we're showing you, this is what happened at the Coliseum this past week. Wow, I need to go buy a ticket and see that, right?
And now part of that allure too is because you got a big crowd at the Coliseum.
Sure.
And I mean, you know, to be honest with you, this is the very first live event for a brand new wrestling company that has changed all of the wrestlers instantly. 3 weeks earlier, it used to be Continental Wrestling, and then it becomes all of a sudden USA Wrestling. Totally different talent, totally different angles. So you've got to start building your crowd again. So you're going to notice, I'm sure everybody noticed that Coliseum was not full.
Sure.
That's for sure. You know, but it is, by the time 25 programs from now, we're going to sell it out. So, but it's going to, each time you see another Coliseum match, it's going to have a bigger crowd in it. But obviously, as Les has said, it's the TV that made you want to come and buy the ticket. That Coliseum, just seeing a big building full of people, just created more interest among the fans.
Sure, absolutely.
So, you know, they have this, and in this particular match, Ron Wright comes in again and gets involved, and he has one of the best lines of the entire show. He ends up giving Buddy Landell something to hit Furnas with, and Furnas crotches him. He's out on the apron and picks him up to drop him inside the ring, and he gives Furnas the shot, and down he goes. And then Furnas is still going to kick out. Ron Wright's standing there watching. He hasn't accomplished what he wanted to accomplish, and he crawls into the ring and covers up Furnas's legs, so Furnas can't kick out.
Right.
And then rolls out, and as he's watching it, he says, "Oh, and I dropped my contact in the ring, and I had to crawl in there and find it." You know, those people, you know, that are Studcast fans that have been listening to Studcast for 4 years, and we talk so much about Ron Wright. I've imitated his best I can, his interviews and his voice. Nobody can really do it. But anyway, you're really getting a feel, if you're a Studcast fan, for just exactly what Ron Wright was all about. Yeah. So, fourth match on the card, Tony Peters against Furnas.
Tony Peters been around a long time. He was a Tri-Cities boy, Kingsport, John City, Bristol. Actually, I guess you'd say he was from the Ron Wright, Whitey Caldwell School of Professional Wrestling. But he was what we call back, he was a carpenter. Mm-hmm. He was a big guy who made baby faces look good.
Enhancement talent.
Yeah.
Enhancement talent, and he does a great job for Furnas, as he did for all guys.
Right.
Everybody. And then Furnas looked absolutely fantastic, man, when he did the big splash from the top rope. That in slow motion.
Yeah.
Wow.
You know, the first time I got to see him live was in Smoky when we did the Night of Legends. And I thought, damn, this guy is so agile, you know, and realize he's a power lifter who has won titles as a power lifter. He played college football. You expect him to be strong, you expect him to be able to move, but he was doing aerial stuff that you just didn't imagine for guys that size back then.
1,000-pound squats.
Yeah.
He had absolutely one of the greatest drop kicks you'll ever see. Yeah. He was one of the only guys I ever saw to do a drop kick and continue on over. Could have landed on his feet. Could have done a drop kick and almost landed on his feet and not take any bump at all himself. Really, really phenomenal talent. Goes on to Japan to become an absolute superstar in Japan. Yeah. And then dies at a very, very early age.
Yeah, he wasn't. That was, what year was, 94 was the Night of the Night of Legends in Knoxville. It was just a couple of years after that.
It was probably before the year 2000, and he was gone.
Yeah.
At probably he couldn't have been much more than 30, 32, 35 years old at the most.
Mid-30s, yeah.
You know, just crazy about things like that and how they happen. And so, you know, you know, the next show, obviously, we got the big USA
Bullet
belt.
popped in there too.
Yes,
so we've seen 3 Armstrongs in the
Yes, it's been a show full of Armstrongs basically, and you know, Bullet kind of arrives at the end of Doug Furnas's match because he's been out of town. He's got picked up by Brian, who left on the start of the show, drove to the airport, picked him up, and gets him back in time. But he only has time to come in before Gordon and I close the show out and talk about what the Wright and his 2 boys did.
There is another guy who you can't imitate his promos.
No.
That was the best Southern babyface promo of the 70s. I mean, I don't care.
Yeah.
I mean,
yeah. He was just absolutely phenomenal at promos. He was pretty damn phenomenal in the ring. He was one of the greatest of all time, no doubt about it.
You're right.
None whatsoever. Obviously, that whole show's built around the belt. Next show is going to come back with who won the belt, obviously. And actually, I still have that belt.
Cool.
And we're going to, starting next week, have it across the front of our little set here.
Oh, you know something we didn't mention too? Last week we were talking about the dog. The dog, his name, Larry Latham. And later in his career, he went with Randy Colley as the Moondogs to WWF. And actually, Larry died in the ring. It hadn't been all that long ago. Early
1993.
93,
yeah. 93 he died in the ring, and you know, he actually worked for me in 1987 and worked for Continental.
Yeah.
In the last year of Continental, you know, and the Tommy Lane, one of the RPMs, the shorter one, he's in Florida now, running a trucking company. He quit just a few years after USA Wrestling. Went down, started as a truck driver, now he ends up running, I think maybe it's his own company, his own trucking company.
That's great.
In Florida. And, you know, as we said, his taller partner there is not with us anymore. Mike Davis is not with us anymore. And, you know, Larry Booker, you know, Larry Latham, you know, had a tremendous career.
Yeah.
Had a great career. And then one other guy that we couldn't remember last week that wrestled Austin Idol in that first Coliseum show, called El Lobo, was a kid named, and I say he was a kid because he was very young when he started. His name was Tim Fry. And he ended up doing about 5 or 6 different masked people in the course of USA and Continental Wrestling. You know, we used him a lot. He was a paratrooper, and he did one of the most unusual finishes. I used to love to come up with something in a cage match that people absolutely have never ever seen, and probably never be done again by anybody. We did it with Kevin Sullivan and Continental with his headhunters, where me and Rob was in the cage match with the 2 headhunters, and a third headhunter, nobody had ever seen a third headhunter, was hidden under the ring, cut through the mat, and pushed the plywood out, came out from underneath the mat inside the cage. And this guy, Tim Fry, in Continental, and it may even been in USA Wrestling itself, rappelled from the top of the Coliseum, which is about 200 feet above the ring, rappelled into the cage on a cage match and turned the tide for the heels. So, you know.
Now, you know something, I'm throwing this aside there. Things like this were done once and you got away from them. And today, one of my complaints is they take a finish and then beat it to death.
Yeah.
Over and over and over, and it loses its steam.
It loses its impact. I mean, you're killing it. You're killing your own thing that was a great deal. And nobody ever came up through the ring ever again after that cage match. And neither did anybody ever rappel from anywhere in the building into a cage.
Although you might see the fans looking up or wondering.
They've been looking for it.
Sure.
They were looking for it. So that's pretty well takes care of number 3.
We want to cover some ground here. We want to mention too that if you're going to be in the Knoxville area, October the 13th, that's a Wednesday, we're going to start the live Studcast at Calhoun's on the River in Knoxville, one of the best restaurants in the area. It's $30, gets you the Calhoun's barbecue buffet. It gets you the show. We're going to do the first hour as Ron does his regular podcast. Our guest's going to be Jimmy Golden, that's Bunkhouse Buck, for those who knew him from WCW. And we'll get door prizes and Q&A session in that second hour. And if you'd like to come, go to tnstud.com and you make your reservations there. And we're looking forward to it because we're going to have a good time. We'll do autographs. We're going to, like I say, a Q&A session on the second hour. And then coming next June 3rd, 4th, and 5th, we'll be at the historic Jacobs Building in Chihauwie Park for Southeastern Memories, celebrating the history of Knoxville's professional wrestling going all the way back to John Kazana's Wide World Wrestling, which I first wrestled for in the 60s, and right through Smoky Mountain, which was Jimmy Cornette's promotion, into the early 90s. So keep that in mind. We'll have more information on that. But
that's on a Wednesday.
Yeah.
Wednesday, October 13th.
Right.
Write that down. As I used to say when I was making an interview, put that circle around this date. October the 13th, and it's going to be dinner with the stud. And with Les Thatcher and with Jimmy Golden.
And we're going to all tape it, and it'll be on the
it'll be on YouTube.
network,
so if you get up and you get recognized and you ask a question on that show, you can be seen worldwide on YouTube.
National star.
A national star. A most unique event. There's never been anyone like it. I don't know of any very many live podcasts that are done.
Not like that
people.
anyway. No,
and
we're
not
dinner
in
and
front
the
of a
whole
great
thing.
number of people.
Something too we might mention to these folks. This is like our fourth.
Yes, we've
fourth
done
one of these
3
we've done,
USAs and 1
If
Southeast.
you have something you would like us to talk about from back in the day, basically, or drop an email to Ron or myself, and on the tnstud.com, and let us know, because we're having fun doing this. We hope you're enjoying, here getting a little bit of history of professional wrestling.
Yeah, and when you go to tnstud.com, be sure and go to Stud Store, and there you'll find Dinner with the Stud. You'll find a big picture of the beautiful restaurant.
Oh, it's right on the river, on the docks, man.
You can throw a rock almost to Neyland Stadium
yeah.
from there. I mean, it's really a beautiful sight. I think it's going to be a great event. I want to remind everybody that every Sunday, 3 o'clock Eastern Time, there's going to be a new USA TV show released. And we're really looking now at doing maybe once a month a Southeastern show of the month, like the 1978 show that we did. So maybe once a month, in addition to seeing 4 new USA TV shows a month on the Southeastern Rewind YouTube channel, you're going to also be able to see one Southeastern, an older one from 78, from the 70s or early 80s. So, and thank everybody. I want to thank all of you.
Join us again next week.
Yeah, we'll be right here and for the old the Rewind review, and we're really looking forward to it. And thank you all for being with us.